Now, hold your peace, for what I am about to tell you has no place in the quiet rhythm of ordinary days. There stands, on a wind-swept hill veiled by centuries of fog, a fortress of stone whose name has long been forgotten. Its battlements have been gnawed by moss and the slow hunger of time, yet its walls endure silent, imposing and strangely alive. For when the rain begins to fall, when the heavens weep their endless silver threads, one wall among them does something no mortal builder could have designed. It cries, droplets course not like the indifferent flow of stormwater, but as though summoned from within the stone itself, as though the fortress were grieving some ancient loss it cannot release. Locals whisper that these are not tears of rain but the last lament of souls tethered to the rock, unable to dissolve into the oblivion they were promised. Imagine it. The storm clouds gather, thunder tolls like the drums of some forgotten army, and from the cracked masonry of that western wall seeps a steady stream of sorrow. Travelers who have taken shelter nearby swear they have seen faces in the trickling water, outlines of eyes, of mouths moving as though in hushed confession. At night, under the glow of lantern flame, the cries seem almost audible, not a shriek, not a scream, but the quiet, breathless sound one makes when mourning a secret too great to speak aloud. No historian can explain this. The castle is a ruin without inscription, its records scattered or perhaps deliberately hidden. Yet folklore has preserved fragments, half-truths stitched together with trembling imagination. They say a noble family once lived within, bound to a destiny both magnificent and terrible. They say the wall itself was never meant to be built, that its stones came from another placer quarry so ancient it was already sacred before the first kingdoms of men rose and fell. Some even whisper that the wall was not raised by human hands at all, but by those who knew how to carve not just matter, but memory. And it is there, in the slow, deliberate weeping of the stone, that the question emerges like a shadow from behind a flame. What sorrow could be so great, so enduring, that even centuries of rain could not wash it away? Why does this fortress still grieve, long after its halls have fallen silent and its hearths gone cold? Perhaps as you listen you feel it too, the chill that creeps not from the storm outside, but from the sense that some places remember more than they should, that the stones beneath our feet have witnessed what we cannot bear to imagine, and in the sound of rain upon their surface lies the echo of a history written not on parchment, but into the bones of the earth itself. When the castle appears for the first time in written chronicles, it is not as a dwelling of joy or power, but as a sanctuary for those pursued by shadows. The year is uncertain, somewhere in the long grey blur between the fall of empires and the birth of kingdoms. A warlord, whose name survives only in fractured syllables, is said to have chosen the hill for its cruel winds and its isolation, declaring that stone raised there would last longer than bloodlines. Yet the masons who labored upon the fortress told a different story. Their hands blistered, their backs broken, they swore the stone itself resisted them, groaning beneath the hammer, splintering in strange, deliberate ways as though reluctant to surrender its shape. One man claimed he saw moisture seep from the rock when he struck it, not dust but liquid, as though the wall already mourned its own creation. Legends entwined this place with the figure of Lady Inara, the warlord's only daughter. She was said to wander the unfinished halls at dusk, trailing her fingers across the damp stones, speaking softly to them as if they were companions. Servants whispered she could hear voices where others heard only silence. The tale tells that when storms lashed the hill, Inara stood beneath the dripping western wall, her eyes wide, her lips trembling as though listening to a song that no mortal should hear. Some believed she was blessed with foresight, others that she bore the curse of communion with things unseen, but all agreed that she grew pale, restless, and heavy with secrets too vast for her youth. There is one story, preserved in the brittle ink of a monastery's archive, of a feast held when the castle was finally declared complete. Torches blazed, goblets spilled, and music rang through the stone corridors. Yet in the midst of laughter, Nada vanished. Servants scoured the chambers, guards searched the gates, but she was nowhere to be found. When dawn broke, she was discovered at the western wall, her gown soaked, her hair clinging like strands of seaweed. She stared into the stone as though gazing into a mirror that showed not her reflection but another realm. Witnesses swore they heard her whisper a single phrase, "They do not rest." From that night onward, every rainfall carried with it the unmistakable sound of tears flowing from the wall. Travelers in the centuries that followed spoke of strange phenomena. Some claimed that when the rain was heavy enough, the wall shimmered faintly with the outline of a figure, a young woman's silhouette, standing as if bound within the stone. Others described hearing a faint choral murmur, not in any tongue they knew, but resonant, mournful, as though hundreds of voices overlapped in a hymn that had no end. Even the bravest knights, drawn by curiosity or arrogance, confessed to sleepless nights after witnessing it. They said the weeping was not merely sound, but an impression pressed into the marrow, a grief that clung long after the storm had passed. And yet, scholars remain divided. Some insist it is a trick of architecture, the way rainwater channels through hidden cracks. Others argue it is the exaggeration of fearful peasants, tales grown fat with retelling. But there are details, tiny, insistent, that refuse to fade. Why do records of Inara cease abruptly, as though she simply vanished from all accounts? Why did successive lords abandon the fortress despite its strategic value, leaving it to crumble while lesser castles endured? And why, even now, does the wall seem to pulse with sorrow on stormy nights, long after the last noble banner fell into dust? As we peel back these layers, one begins to wonder, was Lady Inara truly lost that night, or did she become part of the fortress itself, woven into its stone, bound to mourn not only her fate, but the secrets sealed within? In the end, we are left with more questions than answers. Is the castle merely a fortress, a monument to vanity, or something more sinister? What entity or entities are imprisoned within its walls? And what was the true nature of Inara's gift or curse? You, the listener, must become the judge of these matters. For just as the rain-swept castle broods silently on the hill, so too does the silence between the echoes hold the weight of untold truths. It is up to you to hear them if you dare. Centuries rolled like thunder across the horizon of history, and still the fortress stood, though now it was less a citadel than a husk gnawed hollow by ivy and time. Yet the western wall remained curiously intact, as if preserved by an unseen hand. Pilgrims began to visit, not to pay homage to saints or relics, but to witness its lament. They came from distant valleys, trudging through mud and bramble, carrying candles and muttered wishes. Some sought healing, others answers, but all left with the same haunted impression. The sense that the wall did not merely weep, it remembered. It was during one such pilgrimage that a scholar named Anselm of Dravia recorded an encounter that has never been explained. He wrote that during a night of relentless rain, while the pilgrims huddled in silence, a childless couple approached the wall, pressing their palms against the cold stone. As lightning unveiled the fortress in sharp white light, the wall wept not clear water, but a strange dark sheen, almost ink-like, that traced symbols across the surface. Those who witnessed it swore the markings resembled letters, though in no script known to men. Anselm copied the shapes, and in his journal he claimed they changed each time he looked upon them, as though the wall were writing in a tongue that refused to remain still. His notes end abruptly, the ink smeared with only 3 chilling words preserved at the bottom of the page. The stone listens. By the 15th century, stories of the weeping wall had grown so entangled with rumor that no one could distinguish truth from invention. Some claimed the tears carried a faint taste of salt, as though they came from the sea, though the ocean lay hundreds of miles away. Others insisted that animals avoided the western side. Entirely dogs would snarl, horses would rear, and crows, bold scavengers elsewhere, would not land upon its ledge. It was as if nature itself recoiled from the sorrow housed there. There is one episode, however, that survives in uncanny detail. A lord of the nearby province, determined to rid his people of superstition, ordered the wall dismantled. Workers erected scaffolds and began hammering at the ancient stones. On the first day, progress was made. Yet at nightfall, the scaffolds collapsed without cause, leaving several men shaken and unable to continue. On the second day, the laborers returned, but each blow against the stone caused their tools to splinter, iron shattering as though striking not mortar but something far denser, more defiant. By the third day, the men refused to continue, whispering of faint sobs echoing through their skulls with every strike. The Lord, determined, ascended the scaffolding himself to prove their fears foolish. He raised his hammer, but before he could deliver the blow, the skies darkened unnaturally and a storm broke, sudden and violent. Rain sheeted down, and witnesses swore the wall poured forth water in torrents greater than the storm itself. When the tempest cleared, the Lord had vanished. No trace of him was ever found. All that remained was his hammer, resting neatly at the base of the weeping wall, as though placed there by careful hands. None dared touch it again. After that day, the fortress was sealed by decree. No banner flew from its towers, no lord dared claim its halls. Yet still the rain came, and still the wall wept. And in the hollow ruins the sound lingered soft, relentless, echoing like a lament for all who had once defied its sorrow. But here lies the deepest unease. What if the wall does not merely mourn the past? What if it is not lamenting what has already happened, but warning us of what is yet to come? For each generation that passes finds in its tears some new symbol, some new whisper, as though the stone itself is speaking across the centuries. Some hear grief, others hear accusation, and still others swear they hear a promise that the story is not yet over, and that those who listen too closely may find themselves written into the wall's memory, unable to escape its morning embrace. By the dawn of the modern age, the ruin was little more than a silhouette on the horizon, yet its legend endured like a bruise beneath the skin of local memory. Explorers, antiquarians, even self-proclaimed men of science made the pilgrimage, hoping to strip away myth with reason. But reason, it seemed, dissolved in the presence of the wall's sorrow. Records from the 19th century speak of lantern-lit vigils where investigators pressed delicate instruments against the damp surface, only to find their readings rendered useless, their dials spinning, their notes smudged by inexplicable condensation. One French traveler, Etienne Leroux, described how his compass refused to face north when near the fortress. Instead, the needle turned again and again, toward the weeping stones as though pulled by a magnet of grief. Leroux was not the only one unsettled. A painter from Prague, captivated by the tale, came to capture the ruin on canvas. He painted by day, setting his easel in the tall grasses, the fortress rising dark against the gray sky. But when he unveiled his work, he recoiled. Though his brush had touched only stone, mortar, and ivy, the canvas revealed faces hidden in the shadows of the wall, mouths open in silent cries, eyes blurred with tears, dozens of them layered atop one another. The painter swore he had not painted them, that his hand had betrayed him. Guided by something beyond his will, he left the canvas behind in unease. The villagers burned it, but claimed that as the flames consumed the fabric, they heard faint sighs drifting into the air. It was in this same century that rumors of secret excavations surfaced. Men cloaked in official silence arrived under cover of night, bearing lanterns and chisels, vanishing into the ruin. Locals say they heard the grind of stone being pried loose, the echo of chains being hauled, the grumble of earth disturbed. And then as dawn broke, they saw nothing, no sign of men, no tools, no newly opened ground. Only the wall remained glistening with tears, though the sky was dry. Some whispered that the intruders had been claimed by the fortress, absorbed into the very sorrow they sought to unravel. Others whispered, still darker, that they had found what they sought and carried it away into silence, hiding it in vaults where no light would reach. Yet the wall persisted. Every generation it revealed new mysteries, as if teasing those who dared draw close. One storm in the early 20th century produced a phenomenon witnessed by dozens. Lightning struck the hilltop, and for a brief instant the wall glowed from within. Observers swore they saw, beneath the surface, not solid stone, but something translucent, like glass or frozen water. Behind it moved shapes, pale and wavering, like figures trapped beneath ice, their hands pressed against the barrier as though longing for release. When the glow faded, only stone remained, and none could agree if what they had seen was real or merely a trick of stormlight. And so the question deepens. Is the wall a tomb, a prison, or something strange, still a vessel for memory itself? If Lady Inara's fate is tied within it, then perhaps she is not alone. Perhaps the fortress carries within its stones an entire chorus of souls, their stories unfinished, their laments unresolved. Each tear it sheds may be less a symbol of grief than a confession, a message to those of us willing or reckless enough to listen. But listening is perilous. For those who linger too long beneath its sorrow often report changes within themselves. Dreams filled with faceless figures reaching through rain, unshakable chill even in summer's heat, or an echoing sadness that clings to the heart without origin. One English writer, after a night beside the ruin, admitted he could no longer tell whether the wall was mourning or whether it had taught him how to mourn. He left with trembling hands, muttering that grief, once awakened, is contagious. What then does it mean for a place to cry? What history is so heavy it bends the very elements to its will? The fortress stands not as ruin alone, but as an admonition that memory can petrify, that sorrow can outlast flesh, and that perhaps some walls do more than divide. Perhaps they listen, perhaps they remember, perhaps they wait. And so we arrive at the present, where the fortress still stands against the horizon like a wound the earth refuses to close. It is no longer marked on official maps, no guides lead visitors there, and yet its shadow persists in local speech, soft warnings uttered over firesides, brief silences when the rain begins to fall. Some claim that on storm-heavy nights, the western wall can still be seen weeping from miles away, a shimmer of liquid silver streaming down its face, as though the hill itself were lamenting. Others say that those who approach with curiosity return subdued, hollow-eyed, as if some portion of their spirit had been left behind, drawn into the sorrowful chorus that hums within the stones. What are we to make of such a place? Is it mere coincidence of geology and imagination, rainwater and fear conspiring to weave a myth? Or does the fortress hold within its core something older, something that transcends the fragile threads of time? The unanswered questions remain like thorns. What became of Lady Inara, the pale young woman who heard voices in the dripping mortar? Why do the chronicles of builders and lords alike falter and vanish, as though erased by a hand determined to conceal the truth? And most unsettling of all, why does the wall weep not only in storm, but at times when the sky is still, when no drop should fall, yet sorrow seeps forth anyway, unbidden? Some researchers suggest the wall is a mirror, not of water but of us, that its lament is nothing more than our own grief reflected back, magnified until we can no longer look away. That, in its tears, we hear the echo of every silence we have carried, every loss unspoken, every name forgotten. If that is true, then perhaps the weeping wall is not a relic of one tragedy, but of all human tragedy woven together, a monument carved not by masons but by memory itself. Others argue differently. They suggest that the wall's persistence, its defiance of ruin, its refusal to be silenced, is a sign of intention, that within the fortress beneath the stone lies a secret not meant for USA's covenant struck long ago, binding sorrow to matter, forcing grief to endure until the day it is acknowledged. If this is true, then the tears are not meaningless, they are a summons, a reminder, perhaps even a warning. And now the question turns to you. When you hear of such a place, When you imagine the wall glistening in the rain, do you dismiss it as fable? Or do you feel the chill, that faint pulse of dread that whispers maybe, just maybe, the stones around us are not silent at all, that they remember, and in remembering, they mourn?